The sound of a shovel scraping against rocky earth cut through the desert air like a knife, and Olivia Baker knew with every fiber of her being that she was digging her own grave. Her hands bled from the blisters that had already burst open, her throat burned from thirst, and the three men surrounding her laughed as they passed a bottle of whiskey between them. The year was 1877, and Piotr, Nevada had seen its share of lawlessness, but this was darker than anything she could have imagined. They had accused her of stealing from the mining company where she kept the books, a lie fabricated by the foreman who had tried to force himself on her 2 weeks prior. When she rejected his advances, he planted evidence and turned the other miners against her. Now these three men, drunk on power and alcohol, had dragged her 5 miles outside of town to finish what they considered justice. "Dig faster, girl," the tallest one sneered, his yellow teeth visible through his matted beard. "The deeper you make it, the less the coyotes will bother your bones." Olivia's arms shook as she drove the shovel into the hard ground again. She had tried reasoning with them, tried explaining the truth, but her words fell on ears deafened by lies and whiskey. The sun beat down mercilessly on the Nevada desert, and sweat mixed with tears on her face. She was 22 years old, alone in the world since her parents died of fever last winter, and nobody in Piotr would miss her enough to ask questions. The foreman had made sure of that, spreading rumors about her character, until even the women who used to smile at her in the mercantile turned their faces away. The hole was nearly 3 feet deep when she heard hoofbeats in the distance. At first, she thought it was the heat playing tricks on her mind, but the three men heard it too. They stopped their jeering and turned toward the sound, hands moving instinctively toward their guns. A single rider emerged from the shimmer of heat waves, sitting tall in the saddle on a bay mare that looked like it had been running hard. As he drew closer, Olivia could make out a wide-brimmed hat, a dust-covered duster coat, and something in his posture that spoke of controlled fury. "Keep riding, stranger," the bearded man called out. "This is private business." The rider did not keep riding. Instead, he brought his horse to a stop about 20 yards away and dismounted in one fluid motion. When he removed his hat to wipe his brow, Olivia saw a face weathered by sun and wind, strong jawline, and eyes the color of storm clouds. He looked to be in his mid-20s, and there was something about the way he carried himself that made even the 3 armed men shift nervously. "Private business," the stranger repeated, his voice low and steady. "That what you call making a woman dig her own grave? She is a thief," the second man said, shorter and stockier than his companion. "We are just doing what the law would do anyway." "The law," the stranger said, and there was steel in his tone now, would give her a trial. The law would let her speak in her own defense. The law would not make her dig a hole in the middle of the desert while 3 cowards with guns stand around drinking whiskey. The bearded man's face flushed red with anger. "You calling us cowards? I am calling it like I see it." The stranger's hand hovered near the Colt revolver at his hip. 3 against 1, and that one is a woman half your size who looks like she has not eaten in days. "Yes, I would say coward fits just fine." Olivia stood frozen in the shallow grave, afraid to hope, afraid to breathe. She had never seen this man before in her life, yet here he was, standing between her and certain death. The third man, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward with his rifle raised. "There are 3 of us and one of you, stranger. I would think real careful about what you do next." The stranger smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I have thought plenty. Here is what happens next. The lady climbs out of that hole, gets on my horse and rides back to town. You 3 drop your gun belts and start walking in the opposite direction. Do that, and we all live to see another sunrise." And if we do not, the bearded man challenged. Then I plant you in the hole she dug, and the coyotes get a better meal than they were expecting. The tension stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Olivia watched as the three men exchanged glances, calculating odds, weighing their pride against their lives. She could see them thinking they had the advantage, 3 guns against 1. But something about the stranger's complete calm made them hesitate. His hand had not moved closer to his weapon, but his entire body was ready, balanced on the balls of his feet like a rattlesnake coiled to strike. "Vincent," a voice said from behind the men, and Olivia realized with a start that another rider had approached without anyone noticing. This one was older, with silver in his hair and a marshal's badge pinned to his vest. "These boys giving you trouble?" The stranger called Vincent shook his head slightly. "Just having a conversation about the law, Marshal Dalton. These gentlemen were about to do the right thing." The marshal's presence changed everything. The bearded man's shoulders sagged, and he exchanged defeated looks with his companions. They knew they could not talk their way out of attempted murder in front of a lawman, especially not one who clearly knew the stranger and trusted his judgment. "Drop the guns," Marshal Dalton said, his own weapon now drawn. "All of you, do it slow." The 3 men complied, unbuckling their gun belts and letting them fall to the dirt. Vincent moved then, crossing the distance to the grave in quick strides and extending his hand down to Olivia. She looked up into his gray eyes and saw something there that made her heart skip despite the terror still coursing through her veins. Concern. Real, genuine concern for someone he had never met. "Come on," he said gently. "Let me help you up." Her hand trembled as she placed it in his, and his grip was strong and warm as he pulled her up from the hole. Her legs nearly gave out when she reached solid ground, and he steadied her with his other hand on her elbow. "Easy now," he murmured. "You are safe. I have got you." She wanted to speak, to thank him, to ask why he had risked his life for a stranger, but her throat was too dry and her emotions too overwhelming. Instead, she just nodded, blinking back fresh tears as he guided her toward his horse. Marshal Dalton had the 3 men lined up and was binding their wrists with rope. "I will take these boys back to town and get the full story. Vincent, you make sure the lady gets somewhere safe. Come by my office tomorrow and we will sort this all out proper." Vincent helped Olivia into the saddle of his bay mare, then swung up behind her. She felt his arm circle her waist to steady her, and despite everything she had just been through, or perhaps because of it, she felt safer than she had in months. They rode in silence for the first mile, her body swaying against his with the rhythm of the horse's gait, his presence solid and reassuring at her back. "Name is Vincent Raines," he finally said as they crested a ridge that gave them a view of Piotch in the distance. "Most people just call me Vince." "Olivia Baker," she managed to whisper, her voice hoarse. "They call me Liv." "Well, Miss Liv, mind telling me what that was all about, why those men wanted you dead?" She told him everything as they rode, the words spilling out in a rush now that someone was finally willing to listen. She told him about the foreman's advances, the false accusations, the planted evidence, and how quickly the town had turned against her. Vincent listened without interrupting, his arm tightening protectively around her waist whenever her voice broke with emotion. "The foreman's name is Garrett Sykes," she finished. "He runs the Silver Peak mine and half the town is either employed by him or in debt to him. That is why nobody would believe me. That is why those men thought they could get away with it." "They thought wrong," Vincent said grimly. "Marshal Dalton is an honest man, one of the few left in these parts. He will make sure justice gets done right this time." "How did you find me?" she asked, turning her head slightly to look at him. "How did you know to come?" "I did not," he admitted. I was riding to Piach looking for work. Saw those men drag you past the old Hawthorne ranch on my way in, and something about it did not sit right. Followed at a distance to see what was happening. When I saw that shovel in that hole, I knew I could not just ride on by. You saved my life, Olivia said softly. You could have been killed. Some things are worth the risk. His voice was quiet but firm. Watching an innocent person die and doing nothing about it, that is not something I could live with. They reached Piach as the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of orange and gold. Vincent took her straight to the doctor's office, where old Doc Harrison cleaned and bandaged her blistered hands while shaking his head at the story. He gave her water and bread, which she consumed slowly under his watchful eye, and declared that she would recover fully with rest and proper care. "Where are you staying?" Vincent asked as they left the doctor's office. "I will take you home." Olivia's face fell. "I was boarding at Mrs. Patterson's place, but she turned me out 3 days ago when the rumors started. I have been sleeping in the back room of the mercantile where I worked, but I expect they will not let me back there now either." Vincent frowned, looking up and down the dusty main street of Piach. The town was built on a hillside, its buildings clinging to the slope like barnacles on a ship's hull. Mining operations dominated the landscape, with the Silver Peak Mine's headframe visible on the ridge above town. It was a rough place, filled with rough people, and Vincent could see why Olivia had found no allies here. "Come on," he said, making a decision. "We will get you a room at the hotel. You need proper rest and proper food." "I do not have money for a hotel," she protested. "They took what little I had saved when they searched my room looking for evidence." "I did not ask if you had money," Vincent said simply. "I am paying. I cannot let you do that. You have already done so much." He stopped and turned to face her, his gray eyes serious. "Miss Liv, those men were going to kill you and leave you in an unmarked grave. The least I can do is make sure you have a safe place to sleep tonight. We can figure out the rest tomorrow." There was something in his expression that made arguing feel pointless. So Olivia nodded and followed him to the Piach Hotel, a 2-story wooden structure that looked slightly less shabby than some of the other buildings. The desk clerk raised his eyebrows when he saw Olivia's torn dress and bandaged hands, but Vincent's hard stare discouraged any questions. He paid for a room for a week in advance and handed Olivia the key. "Get some rest," he told her. "I will be back in the morning. We have some things to set straight in this town." Olivia wanted to protest again, wanted to tell him he had done enough, but exhaustion was crashing over her in waves now that she was finally safe. Instead, she just said, "Thank you, Vincent Raines. I will never forget what you did today." "Just Vince," he corrected with a small smile. "And you are welcome, Liv." She watched from the hotel window as he led his horse down the street toward the livery stable, his tall frame easy to track even in the growing darkness. Something had changed in her today, something beyond the obvious trauma of nearly being murdered. For the first time since her parents died, she did not feel completely alone in the world. The next morning, Olivia woke to sunlight streaming through the hotel window and a knock at her door. She had slept deeply despite everything, her body finally allowing itself to rest now that it was safe. When she opened the door, she found Vincent standing there with a package wrapped in brown paper. "Morning," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Thought you might need some fresh clothes. The mercantile owner's wife helped me pick them out. I hope they fit." Olivia took the package, overwhelmed once again by his thoughtfulness. "You did not have to do this." "Yes, I did. We have to go see Marshal Dalton this morning, and you should not have to do it in torn clothes." She changed quickly, finding that the simple calico dress and new boots fit remarkably well. When she rejoined Vincent, He nodded approvingly and offered her his arm as they walked to the marshal's office. The gesture felt oddly formal for a frontier town, but also comforting, like he was announcing to anyone watching that Olivia Baker was under his protection. Marshal Dalton had all three men locked in his jail cells, and they glared at Olivia as she entered the office. The marshal gestured for her to sit and proceeded to take her full statement, writing everything down carefully. When she mentioned Garrett Sykes by name and explained what he had done, the marshal's expression darkened. "I have had my suspicions about Sykes for a while now," he admitted. "But he is careful, and he has powerful friends in the mining company. This might be the opening I need to really investigate him." "Those men said I stole payroll money," Olivia said, "but I kept detailed records of everything. If someone will just look at the books properly, they will see the numbers do not add up the way Sykes claims." "Where are these books now?" "In the office at the Silver Peak mine. Sykes has them locked in his desk." Marshal Dalton exchanged a look with Vincent. "Getting a warrant to search a mine foreman's desk is not easy in this town. The judge is friends with the mine owner." "Then do not get a warrant," Vincent said quietly. "Just go ask to see the books. If Sykes refuses, that tells you something right there. And if he has destroyed them, then we have other problems. But something tells me he is arrogant enough to keep them, figuring nobody would know how to read them properly even if they looked." The marshal considered this, then nodded slowly. "All right, Vincent, you up for taking a ride out to the Silver Peak with me?" "Absolutely." "Wait," Olivia said. "I should come too. I am the one who kept those books. I can show you exactly where the discrepancies are." Both men looked at her with concern, and Vincent shook his head. "Liv, those men tried to kill you yesterday. Going back to that mine might not be safe." "Those men are in jail," she countered. "And I am not going to hide while you two try to clear my name. Those are my records, my work. I need to be there." There was steel in her voice that surprised even herself. She had spent weeks being afraid, being accused, being helpless. But Vincent had given her back something she thought was lost, not just her life but her courage. She was not going to waste it. Vincent studied her face for a long moment, then smiled slightly. "All right. But you stay close to me, and if anything feels wrong, you get out of there." "Agreed." "Agreed." They rode out to the Silver Peak mine as a group, Marshal Dalton on his gray gelding, Vincent on his bay mare, and Olivia sitting behind Vincent again with her arms around his waist. She was acutely aware of his presence, the warmth of his back against her chest, the steady rhythm of his breathing. He had ridden into her life less than 24 hours ago, yet she already felt more connected to him than to anyone she had known in Piotch during the past year. The mine was a sprawling operation carved into the hillside, with the main office housed in a sturdy building near the entrance. Miners stopped their work to stare as the marshal and his companions approached, and Olivia could feel the weight of their hostile gazes. These were the same men who had believed the worst about her, who had turned their backs when she needed help. Garrett Sykes emerged from the office before they could dismount, his face flushing red when he saw Olivia. He was a thick-set man in his 40s with greasy black hair and small, cruel eyes that had followed Olivia uncomfortably during every day she worked for him. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. "Marshal, this woman is a thief. She should be in your jail, not riding around with you." "Actually, Sykes, the 3 men who tried to murder her yesterday are in my jail," Marshal Dalton said evenly. "And now I am here investigating the charges against Miss Baker. I need to see the payroll books." "You need a warrant for that." "No, I do not. Those books are company property, and I am conducting a criminal investigation. You can either produce them voluntarily, or I can shut down this entire operation while I get a court order. Your choice." Sykes's jaw worked silently for a moment. He clearly had not expected this, had thought the matter was closed once Olivia was out of the picture. His eyes darted between the marshal and Vincent, lingering on the latter with obvious calculation. Vincent stared back without expression, but Olivia felt his body tense slightly, ready for trouble. "Fine," Sykes finally spat. "But I am coming with you. I will not have anyone tampering with company records." They followed him into the office, a cramped space dominated by a large desk covered in papers and ledgers. Sykes unlocked a drawer and pulled out 3 heavy books, dropping them on the desk with a thud. Olivia stepped forward, her bandaged hands carefully opening the first volume. It took her less than 5 minutes to find the discrepancies. Her finger traced down columns of numbers, pausing at certain entries, flipping to cross-reference pages. Marshal Dalton watched over her shoulder, not understanding the accounting but trusting her expertise. Vincent stood near the door, his eyes on Sykes, who was sweating despite the cool air in the office. "Here," Olivia said, pointing to a series of entries. "This shows payment of $300 to a supplier for mining equipment on June 15th. But look here in the corresponding ledger, the same payment is recorded as $500. The difference, $200, is listed as coming from my cash box." "That is just a clerical error," Sykes blustered. "You made a mistake when you recorded it." "I do not make mistakes in my books," Olivia said coldly. "And this is not the only one. Here, July 3rd, the same thing. Payment recorded 2 different ways with the difference attributed to my handling. And here, August 20th. Someone has been stealing from the payroll for months and making it look like I was responsible." She turned to face Sykes directly. "It was you. You were skimming money and needed someone to blame. When I refused your advances, I became the perfect target." "That is ridiculous," Sykes said, but his voice lacked conviction. "This is just the desperate accusation of a caught thief." Marshal Dalton closed the ledger with a decisive thump. "Mr. Sykes, you are under arrest for embezzlement and conspiracy to commit murder. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." What happened next occurred so fast that Olivia barely had time to register it. Sykes's hand darted toward a drawer in his desk, and she saw the gleam of metal as he pulled out a pistol. Vincent moved like lightning, crossing the room in 2 strides and grabbing Sykes's wrist before the gun could rise. There was a brief struggle, then Vincent twisted hard and the pistol clattered to the floor. He spun Sykes around and slammed him face first into the desk, holding him there with one hand while the marshal applied handcuffs. "Attempted assault on a peace officer," Marshal Dalton said with satisfaction. "That is another charge. You are done in this town, Sykes." As they led the former foreman out of the office in chains, miners gathered to watch. Marshal Dalton raised his voice so everyone could hear. "Garrett Sykes has been stealing from this company and framed Miss Baker to cover his crimes. She is innocent of all charges. Anyone who says otherwise will answer to me." The walk back to the horses was silent, but Olivia felt the change in the air. Some of the miners looked ashamed, others skeptical, but none met her eyes with the same hostility as before. Vindication tasted both sweet and bitter. Justice served, but at a cost she had nearly paid with her life. Vincent helped her onto his horse again, and as they rode back toward Piatch, she finally allowed herself to feel the relief washing through her. Her name was cleared. The man who had tried to destroy her was in custody. She was alive and safe, and it was all because of the stranger who had refused to ride past when he saw injustice. "Thank you," she whispered into Vincent's back, "for believing me, for not giving up." "I saw the truth in your eyes yesterday," he replied softly. "Sometimes you just know when someone is honest and when they are not. You did the hard part, Liv. You stood up for yourself even when you were afraid. That evening, after Sykes was locked up alongside his hired guns and Marshal Dalton finished all the paperwork, Vincent took Olivia to the only restaurant in Piatch, a small establishment run by a Chinese family. They sat across from each other at a corner table, and for the first time since they met, they had a chance to simply talk without the shadow of danger hanging over them. "So what brought you to Piatch in the first place?" Olivia asked, sipping tea that warmed her from the inside. "You said you were looking for work." "I have been drifting for a few years now," Vincent admitted. "Working ranches, doing odd jobs, never staying in one place too long. I came up from California, heard there might be work in the mines here, though after today I am thinking I would rather find something else." "You do not seem like a drifter," Olivia observed. "You seem like someone who knows exactly what he is doing." He smiled at that, a real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his whole face. "I know what I am doing in the moment. It is the long-term planning I struggle with. After the war, I just could not settle back into normal life. Too many things had changed, including me." "The war," she repeated softly. "You fought for 3 years. I was 17 when I enlisted, 20 when it ended. Saw things no one should see, did things I try not to think about. When I came home, my family was gone, farm was sold for taxes, so I started moving and never really stopped." Olivia reached across the table and laid her hand over his. "I am sorry. That must have been so hard." Vincent looked down at their joined hands, his rough and scarred, hers still bandaged from yesterday's ordeal. "It was. But sitting here with you right now, I am starting to think maybe I drifted to Piatch for a reason. Maybe I was supposed to be on that road yesterday at exactly the right time." Her heart fluttered in her chest, and she found herself unable to look away from his gray eyes. "Do you believe in fate?" "I believe in choices," he said. "I chose to follow those men. I chose to stand up for you, and I am choosing to stay in Piatch a while longer if you think you might want the company." "I would like that very much," Olivia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I would like that more than you know." They talked long into the evening, sharing stories about their lives, their hopes, their fears. Olivia told him about her parents, about growing up in Missouri and coming west after they died looking for a fresh start. Vincent told her about his childhood in Tennessee, about learning to ride and shoot from his father, about the dreams he had once had of owning his own ranch. The restaurant owner had to gently remind them it was closing time before they finally left, walking slowly back toward the hotel under a sky full of stars. "I never properly thanked you for the dress and the boots," Olivia said as they reached the hotel steps. "And the room, and everything else." "You do not need to thank me," Vincent said. "But if you want to repay me, you could let me take you to dinner again tomorrow, and maybe the day after that." "Just dinner?" she asked, feeling bold in the darkness. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Whatever you are comfortable with, Liv. I am not going anywhere." She rose on her toes and kissed his cheek, a brief touch that made her blush even as she did it. "Dinner sounds perfect. Good night, Vince." "Good night, Liv." The days that followed fell into a pattern that felt both strange and wonderful to Olivia. During the mornings, she worked with Marshal Dalton to prepare testimony against Sykes and his men. The mine company, embarrassed by the scandal, had offered her job back with a raise, but she declined. She wanted nothing to do with Silver Peak Mine or the memories associated with it. Instead, she found work keeping books for several of the smaller businesses in town, building a reputation for honesty and accuracy that spread quickly through Piatch. But the afternoons and evenings belonged to Vincent. He had taken a job at the livery stable, working with horses in exchange for a room in the loft and a small wage. It suited him, Olivia thought, watching him gentle a nervous mare or repair a broken harness with patient hands. He was good with animals, good with people, good with her in a way that made her feel cherished rather than possessed. They took long walks together through the hills surrounding Piace, Vincent pointing out plants and animal tracks, while Olivia told him stories about the numbers and patterns she saw in the world. They discovered they both loved reading, though books were scarce in Piace, and they would trade the few volumes they owned back and forth, discussing plots and characters with the intensity of scholars. They learned each other's habits and preferences, the way new couples do, finding joy in small compatibilities and negotiating the minor differences with good humor. The first time Vincent kissed her properly was 3 weeks after they met, on a hilltop overlooking the town at sunset. He had been talking about maybe saving up money to buy some land, maybe starting that ranch he used to dream about, and then he stopped mid-sentence and just looked at her. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "I am falling in love with you," he said simply. "I think I started falling the moment I saw you standing in that hole, scared but not broken. And every day since then I fall a little more. I needed you to know that." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. "Vince, you do not have to say anything back," he assured her quickly. "I just needed to be honest. If you do not feel the same way, if I am moving too fast, just tell me and I will." She stopped him with a kiss, rising to meet him as his arms wrapped around her waist and pulled her close. It was tender and passionate all at once, full of the emotions that had been building between them since that first day. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Olivia pressed her forehead against his. "I love you too," she whispered. "I did not think I would ever feel safe enough to love someone again, but then you rode into my life and changed everything. You gave me back my future, Vince. The least I can do is share it with you." They spent the rest of that evening on the hilltop, wrapped in each other's arms, making plans and promises under the emerging stars. Vincent told her about the piece of land he had found about 10 miles outside of town, 100 acres with a creek running through it, and good grazing for cattle. The owner was willing to sell for a reasonable price, but Vincent did not have enough saved yet. Olivia calculated quickly in her head and realized that if they combined their savings and both kept working, they could have enough for a down payment in 6 months, maybe less. "Are we really talking about buying land together?" Vincent asked, sounding almost afraid to hope. "About building something permanent, unless you have someone else in mind to build it with," Olivia teased gently. He laughed and pulled her closer. "No one else. There could never be anyone else after you, Liv." The trial of Garrett Sykes and his 3 accomplices took place in early October, just as the desert heat was finally breaking into cooler autumn weather. Olivia testified clearly and confidently, explaining the accounting discrepancies and how Sykes had framed her. Vincent testified about what he had witnessed in the desert, his voice hard and unforgiving as he described the scene. Marshall Dalton presented evidence of Sykes's embezzlement, which had totaled over $2,000 stolen from the mining company over the course of a year. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Sykes was sentenced to 15 years in territorial prison for embezzlement and conspiracy to commit murder. The 3 men who had actually taken Olivia out to the desert each received 10 years for attempted murder. As the judge read the sentences, Olivia felt Vincent's hand find hers, his grip steady and reassuring. Justice had been served, and the chapter of her life marked by fear and false accusation was finally closed. They married on a crisp Saturday morning in November at the small church in Piace, with Marshall Dalton standing as witness and a handful of townspeople in attendance. Olivia wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself, and Vincent wore his cleanest shirt and a new vest he had saved up to buy. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, their vows spoken with voices that shook with emotion but never wavered in conviction. "I promise to stand beside you always," Vincent said, his gray eyes locked on hers. "In good times and hard times, in plenty and in want. You saved me just as surely as I saved you, Liv. You gave me a reason to stop drifting, a place to finally call home." "I promise to trust you with my heart," Olivia replied, tears streaming down her face. "To build a life with you that honors the second chance we have been given. You are my home now, Vince. Wherever you are, that is where I belong." They honeymooned, if it could be called that, in a small cabin on the land they had finally been able to purchase the week before. It was rough living, with no furniture yet, and holes in the roof that let in the cold night air, but neither of them cared. They spent their days working on the cabin, patching the roof and building basic furniture from lumber Vincent hauled in from town. They spent their nights wrapped in blankets by the fireplace, talking and laughing and making love with the passion of newlyweds who had found each other against impossible odds. "Tell me about the ranch you see when you close your eyes," Olivia asked one night, her head resting on Vincent's chest as the fire crackled nearby. "I see a herd of cattle grazing by the creek," he said softly, his hand stroking her hair. "Maybe 50 head to start, then growing over the years. I see a real house, 2 stories with a porch where we can sit in the evenings. I see corrals and barns and maybe some chickens scratching in the yard. But mostly I see you, Liv. You are in every part of that picture, making it real, making it worth building." "I see the same things," she whispered. "And I see children too. Maybe 3 or 4 running around, learning to ride and helping with chores, teaching them to raid and cipher, watching them grow up strong and free in this place we are building. How soon do you want to start on those children?" Vincent asked with a hint of humor in his voice. Olivia tilted her head up to look at him, seeing the love and desire in his eyes. "I think we might have already started," she said with a shy smile. "I was going to wait to be sure, but I am 2 weeks late now and I have been feeling strange in the mornings." Vincent sat up so suddenly that he nearly dislodged her, his hands framing her face as he searched her expression. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I think I am pregnant, Vince. We are going to have a baby." The joy that transformed his face was something Olivia knew she would remember for the rest of her life. He kissed her deeply, then moved his kisses to her forehead, her cheeks, her nose, punctuating each one with words of love and amazement. When he finally calmed down enough to speak coherently, he held her close and whispered promises about the kind of father he would be, the kind of life they would give their child. The winter of 1877 was cold but manageable, and by spring, they had transformed their rough cabin into a real home. Vincent built a proper bedroom and a kitchen, installed glass windows he had ordered from Salt Lake City, and constructed a sturdy barn for the 3 horses and handful of cattle they had purchased. Olivia kept books for several ranchers in the area now, her reputation for honesty and skill having spread beyond Piach. She worked from home, her growing belly making the ride into town increasingly uncomfortable as the months passed. Their son was born on a warm June evening in 1878, with the local midwife attending, and Vincent pacing nervously outside the bedroom door. When Olivia's cries finally gave way to a baby's wail, Vincent burst into the room to find his wife exhausted but beaming, holding a red-faced infant with a surprising amount of dark hair. "Meet your son," Olivia said softly, her voice hoarse from effort. "I thought we could name him Thomas after your father." Vincent took the baby with trembling hands, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as he looked at the tiny life they had created together. "Thomas Raines," he said, testing the name. "It is perfect. You are perfect." "God, Liv, I love you so much." "I love you too," she whispered, watching her husband cradle their son with the kind of gentleness that made her heart swell. "We made it, Vince. We built something real." The years that followed were marked by hard work, gradual prosperity, and deep contentment. The ranch grew slowly but steadily, their herd increasing as Vincent proved himself a skilled cattleman and trader. Olivia managed their finances with the same precision she brought to everything, ensuring they saved enough to weather bad years while still investing in improvements and expansion. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved horses and following his father around the ranch, asking endless questions about everything he saw. When Thomas was 3, Olivia gave birth to twin daughters, Sarah and Emma, who filled their home with laughter and chaos in equal measure. 2 years after that came another son, James, who was quieter than his siblings but watched everything with intelligent brown eyes. Vincent built additions onto the house to accommodate their growing family, until their simple cabin had transformed into the 2-story ranch house he had once imagined. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Vincent and Olivia stood on the porch of that house in the evening, watching their 4 children play in the yard while the sun set over the Nevada hills. The ranch now boasted 200 head of cattle, several good horses, and a reputation as one of the more successful operations in the region. But more than that, it was home, filled with love and laughter, and the kind of security that both of them had thought lost forever on that terrible day in 1877. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Olivia asked, leaning into Vincent's embrace. "If you had just ridden past that day." "Every single day," Vincent admitted, his arms tightening around her. "I think about how close I came to losing you before I even knew you existed, and I thank God that I made the choice to stop, to look, to care about a stranger in trouble." "You did more than save my life that day," Olivia said softly. "You gave me back my faith in people. You showed me that goodness still exists in this hard world, and you loved me when I thought I could never trust anyone enough to let them close." Vincent turned her in his arms so he could look into her eyes, those same blue eyes that had looked up at him from that grave so many years ago, terrified but unbroken. "You are the strongest person I know, Liv. You survived something that would have destroyed most people, and you came out the other side with your heart still open. That is what I fell in love with, not just your beauty or your mind, but your courage, your refusal to let evil win." They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, their children's voices carrying on the evening breeze, the life they had built together spread out around them like a promise fulfilled. From attempted murder to true love, from desperation to prosperity, from loneliness to family, they had traveled a long and difficult road together. But every step had been worth it, every hardship overcome, because it had led them here to this moment, to this life. Marshall Dalton visited sometimes, now retired but still sharp-eyed and curious. He would sit on their porch and tell the children stories about their parents' first meeting, carefully edited for young ears but no less dramatic for it. Vincent was always the brave cowboy who stopped the bad men, and Olivia was always the smart lady who proved the truth. The children listened with wide eyes, not quite understanding that their ordinary mother and father had once been the heroes of such a story. As the years turned into decades, the Raines Ranch became a landmark in the region, known for quality cattle and honest dealing. Thomas grew up to take over much of the day-to-day operations, while Sarah showed a talent for numbers like her mother and managed the financial side. Emma married a neighboring rancher and started her own family nearby. James, true to his quiet nature, became a veterinarian and brought modern animal medicine to the ranches around Piach. Vincent and Olivia grew old together, their hair turning silver and their faces weathering like the desert landscape around them, but their love never diminishing. They would sit on that porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sun set over land they owned. Surrounded by children and grandchildren who represented the future they had fought so hard to build. "If I could go back," Olivia said one evening when they were both well into their 60s, "and tell that terrified girl standing in that hole what her life would become, she would never believe me." "What would you tell her?" Vincent asked, his voice still strong despite his age. "I would tell her to hold on just a little longer. I would tell her that a cowboy is coming, riding a bay mare, and he is going to change everything. I would tell her that the worst day of her life is about to become the beginning of the best life she could ever imagine. And I would tell her that love is real, Vince, the kind of love that saves you and sustains you and makes every day worth living, the kind of love I found with you." Vincent lifted her weathered hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I would tell that drifting cowboy the same thing. That stopping on that road, making that choice to care about a stranger, would be the best decision he ever made. That the woman he was about to meet would give him purpose and family, and a reason to finally plant roots. That he was about to stop being lost and start being found." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged one by one, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss on a hilltop so many years ago. Their story had started with violence and fear, with injustice and near tragedy, but it had transformed into something beautiful and lasting. They had built a legacy not just of land and cattle, but of love and loyalty, of standing up for what was right even when it cost something, of refusing to give up on each other no matter what challenges came their way. When Vincent Raines passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, Olivia grieved deeply, but not hopelessly. She had been blessed with 50 years of love from a man who had quite literally saved her life, and then spent every day after proving he meant his wedding vows. She lived another 5 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, telling and retelling the story of how she and Vincent had met, keeping his memory alive through words until she could join him again. They were buried side by side on a hillside overlooking the ranch they had built together, their graves marked with simple stone markers that bore their names and the dates of their lives. But their real legacy was not in stone. It lived in their descendants who carried on the ranch, in the values they had instilled about honesty and courage, and standing up for the innocent. It lived in the story that became legend in that part of Nevada, the tale of the cowboy who stopped when others would have ridden past, and the woman who refused to give up even when men forced her to dig her own grave. It was a love story born from the darkest moment, forged in the hard country of the Wild West, and proven over decades of devotion and shared dreams. It was the story of Vincent and Olivia Raines, and it ended not with death, but with a legacy of love that would echo through generations. A reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the courage to care about a stranger, and the faith to believe in second chances.